All the documents are on my website. All right, so let's go on. Increased knowledge, that's already taken place. You can ask any scientist. You can do your own Google search if you want. Everybody knows that this generation is known as the generation of knowledge. This is what Daniel said in chapter 12. Not only did he say that, but he also said that people would moving to and fro, or back and forth. Well, a lot of people are moving back and forth, all right. Most of them are being moved because of catastrophes and disasters that are going on. And this isn't just in China. It's just not in the United States. It's happening around the globe. Another major sign. Also, Jesus in Revelation chapter 9, verse 21 talks about another label that was going to be labeled to the last generation. And he said that generation was going to be known as the drug generation. That word is pharmakeia when you read that, the Greek word that has to do with magic arts, drugs, and a lot of demon worship. So we know that Satan during this time is going to be very active, and we see that in a lot of the stalkings that I know that you're talking about in your program quite a bit.
The organized stalking?
All organized stalkings. We see that with a lot of crimes that when you do a search, you'll see that police departments have different divisions set up for satanic kind of killings, where they're finding mutilated bodies and their hearts taken out. And it's not uncommon now when you travel across this country and in different places of the world that you will see satanic churches set up. I mean, these are all signs of the last days. So also, here's one of the major points. When Jesus talked about when you shall see all these things, he said, in relationship to Noah's generation, he said it was going to be just the same way as it was with Noah's generation, where they were eating and marrying and giving in marriage until the flood came and took them all away. Well, anybody who does a study about Noah's generations know that homosexuality was very rampant, and they were marrying in the same sex. Now, when the flood came and destroyed the world, and only Noah's family escaped that, you'll never see same-sex marriage again until when? Just now, recently. Mm-hmm. And so Jesus said, all those signs would be here, but this would be the last straw kind of deal that took out Noah's generation. And now it's here again. So we've had a void of this kind of sin for all these generations up until now. At the same time, everything is going down. And I'm telling the people, you who do not read the Word of God are in serious, serious trouble. Because when the Lord comes back, if you do not know and understand, like the Pharisees who did not understand the first coming of Jesus Christ, when Jesus was looking at them and he told them, you can read the signs in the sky, but you can't even discern the times. And so we're living in a time right now where Satan is making people think that it's okay. We just put up with this kind of behavior, but God tells us that it's an abomination and he will take care of this sin. So it is definitely here, and it is one of those signs that will cap off this generation. Right now, California just signed they went out and said it was legal to start these gay marriages, same-sex marriages. Massachusetts is already doing it. They have other places in the country that are doing it. So right now there's people are trying to sign documents to get it on the next ballot in November to try to overturn and amend the Constitution to make it read that a marriage is between a man and a woman and not same sex. But I tell the people, look, we do whatever we can to slow it up, but we know that in the end times they will win out because the forces of evil that are generated are going to be here when the Lord comes back. So let's look at another sign. Russia forms an alliance. Russia, I don't know, if people who don't know the history or haven't followed the news at all, when you go back about 10 to 15 years and look at the Soviet Union, they were powerful. They were They were engaged in world affairs. They were in Afghanistan, at different places. They had nuclear weapons like you cannot believe. But what had happened is they went into Afghanistan. They became a bankrupt nation. Finally, they got tossed out of Afghanistan, and their economy just tanked. They had to stand in line for days for a carton of eggs or a chicken, and they were just depressed nation. And Ronald Reagan came in there, and he was one of those strong presidents that told we're not going to tolerate Russia. And by the Russians staying into Afghanistan, they brought him down. And so I've had people say, well, Russia was not a player anymore. And I said, don't worry about it, because the Lord told us they are going after Israel. Ezekiel told us they were going to make an alliance. This is what's going to happen. So watch what happens to Russia. Well, within that period of time when they collapsed and the Soviet Union became Russia, what had happened is they discovered oil. So now that they discovered oil, they have more oil than Saudi Arabia. In 15 years, they went from being desperate and broke to one of the richest nations in the world. And what it has happened, and all this is documented in my book, they've taken all this resource from black oil. They poured it again into their military. And now they have ships steaming into the Mediterranean. And I'll show you the documents in my book where the Russian leaders are going into the Middle East because they want to show their dominance once again in the Middle East. And so Russia's back, and the reason why they're back is because they are going to lead this attack into Israel in the last days, all at the same time. So, and of course there's other things too that are very influential, that when you talk about, they haven't been around for 2,000 years, and one of those things would be Israel's court. Well, first of all, I think it was in 2014, the Sanhedrin were reestablished again. The Sanhedrin was a court that, in the time that when Jesus was alive, they brought Jesus to the Sanhedrin, 72 religious men who ruled with the high priest. And Jesus went before the Sanhedrin, and it was a sham court. But as a result of that bringing Jesus, the Sanhedrin was able to bring Jesus to the Romans, and everybody knows the story that the Romans crucified Jesus under the authority. The Romans had the authority to do it, but only because it was the will of the Jewish people. And even Pilate said, I'm washing my hands, I find no fault in Jesus Christ. And so the Sanhedrin, for the first time, I think it was about the actual date, was about 1,600 years, because they ruled for a little while until Israel was completely destroyed and led into captivity. So now the Sanhedrin is here again, and just, I believe it was a month and a half ago, or 2 months ago, you can read this on page 175 of my book, the Israeli courts authorized the sacrifices of lambs. Now, this is very significant because the Jewish people haven't had a sacrifice, an atonement. This is how they believe that they're sacrificing their atonement for their sins. They haven't done this since the old temple was established. And now, for the first time, a few months ago, they had their first sacrificed lamb in preparation for the new temple that's going to be rebuilt. This is part of the prophecy. This part has been fulfilled where they're going to get ready to do this. The other part of the prophecy is that the third temple will be rebuilt. And this is the temple that Jesus refers to in Daniel, when Daniel said that in his book that this kind of temple was going to be rebuilt again. So it is coming. They have, in my book, you'll see that Israel has everything in order to redo the temples. They have the stones from a war that they took the stones out of in Lebanon when they went up there once. And they defeated the enemy up in Lebanon, and they took some of the stones that they needed to rebuild the temple, brought it back. And just recently now that they're doing the garments, the priestly garments that are not going to be in a museum,